Go on. Don't die on me. Don't die on me. Not for the video. Hey guys, this is Hell Hades. This is another Raid Shadow Legends video. Guys, today we're going to talk about probably the most important topic in Raid Shadow Legends. We're going to talk team synergy. Okay? Getting the best champion, great. All of that stuff helps. Getting good gear, great. It helps. But if you do not build teams with good synergy, then you cannot tackle some of the harder content in this game. And this video is going to be relevant to Faction Wars, which is kind of what I built the team synergy stuff to. But the same rules will apply if you're fighting Doom Tower, some of the dungeon content, anything really where you're trying to get through waves of mobs and then deal with a boss. And I guess even if you talk about the arena or clan boss, it's still all about, do you have the right team synergy to be able to beat the content that you're doing? So if you see my team here just quickly, I've got two legendary champions, Razin and Fushan. Razin's in there because he drops defense and he applies a weaken. Plus he does a lot of damage to our mobs on waves. Fushan's in there for speed and damage. But then I've got Haruspex, who is a rare in my standard level 21 team because he's got a revive and a bit of poison. I've got Jared in there because he protects my team from this guy with his massive mallet. And then I've got Aox in there because he does things like decrease attack and he applies some poison. So this team is just a consistent, easy level 21 team. And I have got better champions than this in this faction. But in terms of synergy and me literally just throwing a team together, which I thought would work, this works. And I can go and farm my points for clan versus clan and enjoy the experience of clan versus clan. So what we're going to do today then, I'm going to show you my updated Ultimate Faction War Guide. I've put the new champions in and we're going to talk through the different factions. But what I would say to you is, you can use this same guide on a much broader scale when you're using it for Doom Tower. Just look at the different roles that you need to fill and fill the same roles when you're doing different content. And a really good rule of thumb is if you cannot beat the content you're trying to beat, you probably don't have enough team protection or enemy control. So what do I mean by that? You see here, I've tried to label it up. Basically, CC is crowd control. Yeah. So who is going to control the waves of content? Who's going to control the enemy so that we're not getting hit as much? That's basically what it means. Who's going to heal and protect us so that if we are taking hits, we can stay alive and ride it through to the end? And who's going to revive us if we get an absolute tonkin? Yeah. So these three roles are massively important. And often, if people are struggling to beat content, they try and push more damage. More damage. It's like this kind of like brain dead, tunnel vision, damage. It's like, no. Take a step back and realize that you're losing because you don't protect your team enough. So, what's the main roles then? We've got AoE decreased defense. This means that you can get through the higher levels of content much quicker. Every single mob that we go up against in high level dungeons, Doom Tower, Faction Wars, whatever, their defense number is crazy high. If you don't decrease their defense and mitigate and stop them from mitigating loads of your damage, then it'll just take you a long time to clear anything. So AoE decreased defense is particularly strong. You then want your damage dealers. In fact, this is probably the last role that I tend to fill because you can beat anything without damage. But good damage dealers here. We've got AoE decreased attack. Generally, this just means that you take less damage when it happens. It's particularly good in wave content. It's very useful against bosses as well. Aox, we just saw in that last run, was my AoE decreased attack champion for waves, but also he applies it to the boss. Crowd control. So this can be things like who's going to stun the enemy, who's going to freeze, who's going to taunt, who's, all of these things. Who's going to provoke, who's going to daze, etc. Yeah, so anyone who does that in a decent level, we put it here. Who's going to heal and protect? I've already spoken about it. So this can be skills like ally protection, general just straight healing. It can be things like block debuffs on your team, increased defense, strengthen buff. So all of those kind of good buffs that keep you alive, or those strong healers that keep you in the game. We then got revivers. Generally, there's only like 2 or 3 per faction. So if you've got one, especially for faction wars, it's important to factor them in. But I'd say really for any content, if you're struggling to get through it, having a reviver is really important. And then lastly, on the right-hand side, we've got people that do turn meter control. Now, turn meter control on an AoE basis is fantastic to beat waves up. Turn meter control single target or chunky amounts of it is fantastic against nearly all bosses. Yeah, so this is my my banner lords. You see the tabs down the bottom here that goes right the way across the different factions. We've now got a one for Shadowkin in there as well for when that starts to pop up. And basically, it enables you to build your team. So what you're looking for are champions that feature in a lot of different areas if you can. So if you've got yourself a Stag Knight, I rate him personally as legendary as a decrease defense, legendary as a decrease attack. Reason why he's rated so high is because he's got a really high chance to place that skill. But then he also brings a decreased speed. I don't know if I've got... I should really put him in turn meter control as well if I haven't. Maybe I will add him in. But it's like, what else can he do? Someone like Oathbound here. Oathbound comes in, can do decrease attack, can also do crowd control for you. Who else we got? Someone like Raglan, if you've got this legendary, a reviver, but also a healer protector. Yeah, someone like Helmet, fantastic champion. Actually comes in as a good damage dealer, brings you some crowd control at a legendary level, but also brings turn meter control. So what you're looking for is from your champions, like which ones have you got that you can bring in that synergize well so that you can then bring in your damage dealers, okay? And this is not just all legendaries and epics. We've got rares in here as well. Rares that I think are decent to bring into this type of stuff. Factor in here as well. Okay, so that's the Banner Lords. If we look at High Elves, actually High Elves used to be probably the easiest faction to beat. And I'd say over time, they've had the least champions added to it for a long time. So I guess the good thing with High Elves is Apothecary is really strong and he's a rare. Arbiter, eventually you'll get from missions if you can get past the arena stuff. And then it's kind of fill the gaps. So, you know, do you manage to pull yourself someone like a Vergis or a Thanassel, who are both really good team protectors? Do you get that Tyrell to drop the enemy defense and give you turn meter control and, you know, drop the attack of an enemy? There's a lot that Tyrell can do. But again, you're kind of just looking for that team synergy. We've also got Reliquary Tender in here as a rare. She is void, but a rare that can revive. She's actually really good for that type of role. So Sacred Order, we do have quite a few new champions in the Sacred Order, and the faction is kind of stacked with really high quality epics. So people like Deacon, you see Deacon feature here, and it will be over in the turn meter control as well. Someone like Armiger comes in as a great turn meter control champion, especially on bosses, but you can also do some damage. You've got champions like Phoenix, old school, but still insanely good. Bit of turn meter control and a smack, AoE smack in his kits. You've even got a couple of good rares that can fill in this team. So, you know, someone like Draconis can come in as a good protector for the team and do some work there. You've got people like, I guess, weaker, but, you know, Adriel is not terrible. Templar is actually really good for crowd control. Templar can throw out a bunch of taunts and makes himself unkillable, I believe, from memory. So pretty good. And you've got people like Aethel as one of the starter champions that can do a bunch of damage as well. So overall, I'd say this is a faction that's really well fleshed out. You should be able to find yourself some decent champions to do some work. Mistress of Hymns is actually kind of good in this faction for that revive opportunity. Why revive so good for faction wars? You need everyone alive to get 3 stars. So against people, boss fights especially, having revivers is actually super good. If we go on to the Barbs then, again, Barbs have been fleshed out a bit recently. They got some better champions now. I'd say one of the standout additions is Armina, who now does drop defense. She's got crowd control and turn meter control, so she comes in as a really valuable epic. Soul Bond has always been a good rare in this team. So Soul Bond does a good amount of damage. She does turn meter control. If you put her in a stun set, she actually does a good amount of crowd control for you as well. So don't forget that champion with AoE A1s can be really good stun set champions to give you the CC if you don't have champions that do it. If you're a little bit old school and you've still got Kantra, Kantra was a fusion. She is insane for this faction. And obviously we get from login rewards, Seal. So Seal comes in. I've got her in as God tier crowd control. Honestly, that may be harsh. Maybe she should just be straight up legendary for it. She's got a revive. She's got heals and protections. I mean, she's just bonkers, to be honest. So as a free champion, she's awesome. We also get High Katoon as a freebie. She's awesome. We've got War Maiden that can come in as a freebie, as a God tier drop defense. So I feel like this faction, we get given a good amount of the base stuff that we need. And then it's about, again, fill the gaps. What do you need to get you through the different levels? So Barbarians, pretty solid. Ogden Tribes, maybe one of the harder factions, but again, we've had some good fillers recently. So if you're lucky to pull a Bellower, Bellower just fills a ton of roles. If you're lucky to pull Udo as an epic, fills a few roles for you, but really well. There's a good assortment of damage dealers in this faction. Ogden Jailer actually is a rare. I did a guide on him a while back. Crazy amount of single target damage, especially good against boss fights. I use him in my team, in my level 21 team. That's how good he is. And I've got a bunch of these legendaries. Who else have we got in here? Crowd control in this team, pretty solid as well. So people like Ignatius, Prundar, the Cake Eater, actually pretty good for a faction war team, in fairness. If you were fortunate enough to be around to get Gerptuk, not Gerptuk, Drokol, he is half decent, I'd say here. But honestly, the standout for me, which is a free champion, is Grush. Heals, protects, AoE decrease attack, plenty of damage in what he does as well. Does leech on his abilities, does healing. He is actually a staple for this faction, for a faction war team. Maneater's the other one. If you built Maneater out for Clan Boss and you've got him, I mean, he's just insanely good. Insanely good. Turn me to steal. So especially against bosses, he's insanely good. You probably would need to build him slightly different to how you do in your Clan Boss, because you're going to want him to steal turn meter. But he is invaluable for faction wars. So let's talk Lizardman then. Lizardman, you just saw my team. And I was running Aox. You see he's up here. I was running Haruspex. Great rare for faction wars, I would say. Turn me to control, poison, revive. Yeah. You can get Broadmoor as a fusion. Actually pretty decent here as well. Since his buff, he's even better. Honestly, without legendaries in this faction, your opportunities drop. But there are now a couple of better epics. And there's a couple of half-decent rares. So it might be the faction you end up doing later, depending on whether you get yourself a Draco or a Roxanne, something like that. If you pull Krisk, Krisk can probably single man it. Look how many tiers Krisk falls into. Decrease attack, decrease defense, crowd control, heals, protects, turn meter control. It's like, damn, this guy literally carries everyone. Bergam Carl's not terrible here either. Can clear off the buffs from enemies, which is pretty good against faction wars. Quadran's not bad as well. So a much tougher faction, I'd say, but still, when you're building team synergy, it's about who have you got that fills a number of different roles. So Skinwalker's probably the slimmest of factions, really. In terms of ones to call out, I'd say Ursine Ironhide is decent. Gnarlhorn as a rare is probably one of the best crowd control champions in the game. Basher as an epic got me through faction wars when I first tried to beat it. He does his AoE ability that locks out all of the opponent's skills. Means when you're coming up to someone like the Valk Waves, you can just lock out their abilities for 2 turns and hopefully take them down in that time. We've got people like Taurus who can throw out a load of poison, which can do a lot of damage against bosses. Fane good against boss fights. Norog as a legendary is actually pretty damn clutch. AoE block buffs plus a load of damage. We've also got Fleshmonger in here as a as a rare. So Fleshmonger, it's hiding behind me. But basically, he is the only rare, or unless you get a Void Legendary, he's the only champion that can do an AoE drop defense in this faction. So again, pretty clutch. You see how strong Coronar is for this faction. Pretty much hard carries it if you get him, but very difficult to get. But you will be needing to look down the ranks a bit further at some of the epics and rares likely to take this one down. I'd say don't discount how strong Poison is against bosses. Taurus, Steel Skull, Fane, all bring a lot of damage if you can get them to the boss. Very slim pickings on revive champions in this faction. Skinwalkers need love a lot. Go to Orcs then. One thing I'll say actually, because people are going to mention this, when you get further along my sheet, there's some sort of caching thing going on. We will make this into a website page, which is all fancy and stuff. But right now, the further you get, you'll see when you first click on it, all of the images are not synced. If you click out of it and then click back in, they do sync in. I don't know what it is. It's some sort of caching problem, I think. But maybe there's just too much info in this sheet. But when you click back in it for a second time, they are in place. So, Orcs then. I mean, Seer is just a hard carry if you've got her, like she is everywhere in the game. Growhack's actually not terrible here if you get him as a legendary. It's kind of useful. But again, you get Shaman as a freebie. Good for that revive. If you get the Hermit, fantastic. Really good support champion with some turn meter as well. I would say Sandlash comes in as a good champion with some damage and some support. If you've got Brado, he's just fantastic here. Defensive for your team, crowd control, lots of damage. In fact, he needs to go in the damage chart as well. And he brings decreased attack. So, great champion for this. Zargala, also fantastic. AoE decreased defense. Same with Duke. Duke's actually like a upgraded version of Zargala in a way because he also brings decreased attack and he brings some crowd control and he's defensive based, which means it's easier to keep him alive. So, again, pick your comps that make most sense, but pick people that fill a number of different roles. So Demonspawn then, massively fleshed out faction now. Allure in particular, you'll see where she features in turn meter control. She is particularly strong against bosses. She will keep the turn meter of the bosses down to 0. You just got to get her there. What's the best way to get her there? I'd say if you've got an Umbral, she's one of the best ways to get her there because of her crowd control ability. There is something to do on Faction Wars. If you're close to beating a wave, same with Doom Tower, same with anything actually. If you're close to beating a wave, A1 is your friend. Stop using all your big abilities. Take it off auto if it's a tough bit of content for you. And A1 the last couple of mobs so that you get your big abilities back for the next big wave. And then you can use your big abilities again and find it much easier. Drexar is available for free and he's a fantastic champion. And then you can see there's a whole bunch of epics now that can fill roles here. Fellhound's also a really good rare that comes into a number of spots. Abyssal's actually kind of good healer protector if you're struggling to keep people alive. Honestly, if you've got Duchess here, then it becomes tons easier, but she is legendary. Diabolus is actually not bad in a stun set as control, and she brings you some speed. But yeah, good options in the Demonspawn faction. So Undead, I'm not going to spend too much time here because they're just so fleshed out with fantastic epics and good rares. Ones I would call out are Vogoth, absolutely like total team carry for an epic. Gordorab, total team carry plus a fantastic revive skill. Seducer as a rare, I would call out as a really, really powerful rare with an AoE decrease attack. Put him in a stun set or a taunt set. He's defense based anyway, so he can tank up a load of damage for you. Lich is actually a little bit underrated here as well. Could come in and just be a good protector. Same as Elatard. Actually got a good amount of crowd control and a good amount of protection. Probably can just run him at level 50 as well if you get a bit of accuracy into his build. But you can see there's so many good champions in here. You actually get Dark Elf Hane as a freebie as well, so she can be really powerful. If we go on to Dark Elves, similar sort of thing. Dark Elves are overrun with fantastic champions and fantastic epics in particular. Tons of good damage dealers. We're in this kind of fight to get Ruel at the moment. I don't feel like he brings a lot other than damage. It does bring increased accuracy for your team as well. But there's quite a lot of decreased defense champions in this faction. Good amount of decreased attack champions. And often they're doing the same job in this faction. I don't know why they've made so many for one faction and not many for others. But there's a lot of options in Dark Elves. As we go across here, we can see tons of turn meter controllers. Visix is now actually really, really strong for this faction. For Faction Wars, she used to be like wavering down the bottom. She's kind of popped up a lot higher. Caden is fantastic as well as a reviver, stroke, decrease attack champion, and just a solid unit. Good amount of damage. And then you might have other people just built already for other content. So people like Coldheart could come in here. Sylar can come in here. Luria, they're all fantastic. So Dark Elves, honestly, one of the easiest to beat. Night Revs then. So Night Revs, again, oh, no, not again. This is probably one of the harder ones to beat, I'd say. They've got Rector now, who has come in as kind of like clutch, revive champion, protector, massive amount of healing. If you've got Rector, then you can definitely start to do this faction a lot easier. The boss is kind of like a race. So if you've got someone like a Tomb Lord, you can massively cut down that race. One of the best champions in this faction for Faction Wars. But people like Faceless does a lot of damage, Skullcrown to do a lot of damage, and a Weaken. Also, if you put her in a stun set, she can be really good crowd control for you. Beast-Created Monster, legend here. Doom Priest, fantastic here, especially against bosses to get rid of the debuffs. And again, you can see us kind of spattering of rares. So Executioner actually pretty cool here. Bit of crowd control, bit of turn meter control. Whisper can do a ton of damage here as well. So on to Dwarves then, only a couple to go. Dwarves, honestly, since they've made a bunch of additions over the last, 3 patches, Dwarves are now really well fleshed out. They were in the same sort of position as the Skinwalkers, but now I wouldn't say that's the case. Fodbar even coming in as a really good decreased defense champion, if you've got him. Kurzad as a rare, as a decreased defense champion on a weaker scale, is actually really good for Faction Wars. Someone like Rearguard is clutch for the boss fight. If you've just got Brogni, he's insanely good for this faction. And then we've now got a couple of revive champions in here as well. So we've got Runekeeper and Melga, who are both fantastic for this champion. Morley, if you're old school and you got her from the Fusion, or if you pulled her, brilliant here as well. So again, there's a lot more options. In terms of rares, you actually got Painsmith. I think I saw, trying to remember who it was. I think it was Ian Steemin. I think that was the YouTuber that did a video on Painsmith with him wrecking the Platinum Arena. It was actually a really cool video. You should check it out. But yeah, Painsmith actually does a ton of damage. So, you know, as a rare, he could come in and do some work for you. Avir can do some work in terms of protection and turn meter control. Drops a bit of poison as well. So there's now a lot more options in this faction. Gala is another one. Gala is fantastic for damage for the final boss fight. And then lastly then, so the first time I'm showing this one, Shadowkin, we're starting to get a faction. So we're starting to get a group of champions that can actually deal with a crypt if they put one out. So I would say we're maybe, I don't know the answer to this, by the way, but I think we're probably a couple of patches away worth of a few more Shadowkins being added before they release a crypt. So if you're close to Lydia, bear that in mind. But who have we got in here then? So we do have a decreased defense, but it's a legendary, so it feels like we need a rare or an epic that can help us out here still. I would say if I was building this faction out. We've got Hotatsu now as a good AoE decrease attack champion, plus with some protection for your team. Burangiri, who came out last patch, I think is going to be a big champion in this faction. I also think Taragi is already going to be an absolute staple for this faction. At the moment, we don't have an out-and-out reviver. Sashi revives if she kills someone, so that's not terrible, but it's not perfect. And we're probably a bit short on turn meter control from this faction as well. There is a lot of damage. Pretty much the champions that are coming out at the moment, a lot of them are focused around damage. Gembo in particular, I've just pulled him. I will do a guide on him very soon. He is looking sweet as an epic, void epic. But yeah, there you go, guys. Now, when I was saying earlier, you can use the same rules to build your own teams for dungeons and stuff. Yes, you can. Just look through and think to yourself, which ones of these decreased defense champions have I got that are the right affinity for the dungeon I'm trying to face? Where is my damage coming from? Where's my crowd control coming from? Use the same rules and apply it to the synergy you need for dungeons, and you will find this game tons easier. Tons easier. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed that. Hope you used the guide. I will pin this in my pinned comment. Come and use it as and when you want. Remember the stupid thing about the cash in, because loads of people messaged me about that. I've been Hell Hades. I will see you later.